Hello, M.Strange here. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about cameras and just about camera choice and different cameras. And I think the first thing about cameras is that if you want to learn how to use cameras or kind of just get in that whole frame of mind, the best thing you can do is go buy like a real camera, like a digital SLR, and just start shooting photos and get like a couple different lenses at least. Have like a wider lens, like a 24 millimeter or smaller, and then like a zoom lens, something like 80 millimeters and higher, and then if you can too, like a macro lens for shooting super close-up stuff. And just shoot a bunch of photos, and that's how kind of I learned, was using video cameras and still cameras to learn how I wanted to express myself through photography, and why and when I would use different shots, and also watching films and things like that can help you. But firstly, this is something that I do because I'm using a different cameras than Cinema 4D, and by default they're just called camera. So something that I do so I know what kind of camera it is, I'll make an espresso tag and drop the camera in there twice, and then I'll go here and take the focal length and then input it into the name. So now the camera's name will be its focal length. So if you change its focal length, it'll change the name. So if that's a 24, then it's a 24. So then I know. So now why, in this scene, let's say why would you use a wide angle lens? Like, let's say this shot selection here, a 24. So this is just the way I do things. I think of like a wide angle lens or a wider lens. You're showing where the character is. You're showing something about where they are in relation to their location in the world, right? So you're showing where they are. And then why would you use a wider lens? Like an 80, let's say. I mean a narrower lens, a zoom lens. So if a wide angle shows you where they are, then the narrow lens or the zoom lens shows you what they're thinking, because you get a closer look into their eyes and their face and their mannerisms. So let's go back, and it's like we can either even use a super wide lens. So wide lens, where is this guy? Oh, he's in this weird blue place. It's too far, so you can't really get what he's thinking besides his body language or his pantomime, which is hard. But then we'll use a really good zoom lens or a 150, and now we can actually see what he's thinking. So in storytelling or filmmaking, kind of what I'm doing all the time, it's like, where are we? What are we thinking? What are we feeling? Because this is also, you can get what the character's feeling. So when they go to a new location, you've set it up. If you want to show the viewer where you are, you would use a wider lens or a master shot to show them, show the audience where you are. If you don't want to show them where you are, then you would use zoom lens or narrow lenses, because it's not showing, it's only giving you little glimpses of the location. So they're wondering like, what is this place? Where is this place? So by using the zoom lenses, you're limiting their ability to know where they are. Again, you go back to the wide, you're showing them. So those are two things that I use cameras for, and I guess I'm pretty traditional in that I come to a new location, I do the master shot, the wide shot, to show you where you are, and then I'll cut away usually, and then I'll go into, not 1500 lens, to a more narrow lens, so you can actually see what the character's thinking and feeling. And usually, I guess a mistake a lot of people will make is that wide lenses tend to make stuff look like cooler because they exaggerate distance, perspective, and actual size. So it can give you some really interesting looking things, but I guess what it comes down to is like, why do you want to use those things? So like, I can make this like super wide, like a 10 millimeter, like a super wide. This would be like a fisheye, and you can see this and like, yeah, it looks all bent out of shape and distorted, but why would I want to use that? So unless you have a reason, because when I first started making films, I did it with video, live action. I just thought like I wanted interesting looking camera angles and lighting. Like it just should look cool and I should use all this exotic stuff. But when I was doing it, I didn't know why. So when you come to know why you're framing things the way you are or lighting them, then your camera choice will be made for you. Because if you know what you're trying to do, like, oh, I want to make this guy or this scene or something feel really claustrophobic, or make it so the viewer is disoriented or doesn't know where they are. So then, if that's your goal, then you would be using a narrow lens so you could limit the viewer's ability to see where they are and look, see what's around, and then you would just give them little glimpses. If you have something else in mind, like some kind of adventure or something, or they're traveling around and you really need them to know where they are, then you could use a wider lens. And also you can see that by using wider lenses, it's a lot easier to isolate your character. So this looks a lot more desolate and scary, or lonelier than this does. So it's almost like it's a lot about exaggeration and expression and knowing, but it's all about, I guess, knowing what you want to express. So if this was a female character and you wanted her to look appealing or something, like, you're not going to go and stick a wide angle lens in her face unless you want her to look gross, because it exaggerates the size of people's features and stuff. But if this was a monster and you wanted it like let's open this guy's mouth up. If you wanted it to show, I don't know why his mouth isn't opening. Something's wrong in this setup, but yeah, you would open its jaws and then it would look scarier, more grotesque, because you're using a wider lens. And in photography, like when they shoot glamour photography, like when they're trying to make people look attractive, they'll never use a wide lens. They'll use super narrow lenses, like flat lenses, like this. So if you're getting your characters or people looking weird when you're shooting their faces, or they just don't look as good as like a glamour photo or something. I mean, if you know photography, you already know this. But if you don't, try using a really narrow or flat lens, because what it does is that it flattens people's features. So say if this guy had like a nose that stuck out further or whatever, by using a narrow or flatter lens, it's going to flatten those features and make things look nicer. So for like your emotional close-up, you would want to use a lens like this, or a flatter lens, and that's why they're called flat lenses. They're referred to by the name flat lenses because they compress space. So if you look at this in 3D space, like where the guy is and these background objects are pretty far, right? But when you're using a narrow lens or a zoom lens, it compresses the space, so it looks like they're a lot closer. And then if you were to go to a wide lens, what a wide lens actually does is exaggerate space. So it makes the stuff look a lot further away. So if you wanted to make some horror scene where like a guy's being chased by a monster and he's trying to reach a doorway or a way out, if you want to make it seem more desperate or scarier, then you would use a wide lens to make the door seem like it's further away. In a shot like this, let's say, right? And then conversely, you could also mess with people in that you could use a flat lens so that your guy's running for the door and you want to make it seem like he's never going to reach it. You would use a flat lens because it looks like, well, it's just right there, it's right next to him, but he would never reach it, or it would take a really long time because we're compressing the space. So those are two different uses that you could have for those different lens types. And so I guess, yeah, it's really about what you want to display and what the scene is about and what's going on. That's how you know how to choose lenses. So just as a basic thing, I would say if you never thought about it or you're really new to it, think about using a wide lens to show where your character is or show what's going on if you choose to, if you want to, and then a narrow lens to show what they're thinking or feeling. And also a narrow lens if you want to hide things, if you want to keep some kind of mystery or you don't want to reveal everything all at once, you use a narrow lens. If you want to show everything or where they are, then you'd use a wide lens. If you want to exaggerate space, also a wide lens. You want to make it seem more desolate, you want to make things seem more lonely or lonelier, then use a wider lens. If you want to make things, I mean conversely, of course, if you want to make things seem closer, make it seem less desolate or cozier, comfier things, usually you would be using narrow lenses that compress space. They make people look nicer and they make things look like they're not so far away. And then also, if you're following the laws of true camera optics, when you're using a really narrow lens or a zoom lens, that's when you'd have a lot of bokeh or the background blur. So then this stuff would be all out of focus. You'd have like an extremely shallow depth of field. So that's kind of been trendy. That's what people like doing with like digital SLRs and stuff. They like the shallow depth of field. And I mean, I like doing that too, because it really allows you to focus on your character or what's in the foreground. So, and depending on what camera system you're using, if you're using the new Cinema 4D physical camera, I think you just turn it on. If you're using the old render engine like I am, you do it manually. But that's when you would get that. So, I mean, you wouldn't have, if you had a wide lens like this, and then you tried blurring the background or making a shallow depth of field, that wouldn't be photographically accurate or correct, because a real camera lens wouldn't do that. With wide lenses, everything's sharp. So those are things to know. I mean, that's what you learn from using a real camera and real lenses. You kind of know what they can do and what they can't do. And if you decide, it's not a rule, I decide to follow the laws of photographic optics or whatever, but you don't have to. You can do whatever you want. I'm just talking about or telling you about like what I choose to do. So those were some thoughts about cameras, and that was just static cameras. I'll do another one where it's actually with camera moves. So if you have any questions or comments or requests as to some other things you want me to go into and discuss in tutorials, please let me know and I'll do my best. Until next time, M.Strange saying, watch out when you're alone in the dark with the candle in the wide angle environment, and the bye.